So good day, everyone. You're all very welcome to this Knowledge Hub session in which we'll be discussing the airport commercial business model in the COVID-19 era and beyond, with three distinguished guests who will each bring their own view of where we are as an industry and where we might be heading next. So joining me today are PT&M Airport Public Tender and Marketing Specialist Managing Director Eric Trichot, who represents the tender process at several airports that we'll talk about shortly. International Shops Director Matthew Greenbaum, and Midway Partnership CEO and Vantage Airport Group VP Commercial Sami Patel. You're all very welcome. The format is fairly simple. To kick off, Eric's going to give us a view of managing a tender process in a COVID-19 affected world, leaning on examples from the airports he's been partnering with recently, and he'll assess how we need a different set of rules for bidding in this new environment. And Eric builds on his excellent input into a webinar in this theme that we hosted last year on the future of the contractual model at airports. And we then have a chance to talk about the business and the business model today and tomorrow with Matthew and Sami, asking them about their own company's experiences amid the crisis. So to begin, Eric, the floor is yours.
So just as a quick introduction of my company, PT&M, Public Tender and Marketing, has been created in 2003 and is very different from the other consultant companies that you can often see in this world. Why? Because we are based on experience in airports. My partners for this company are Mr. Guy Ponzo, who has been the commercial director of Milan and Rome Airport, Mrs. Ilse Rufer, who has been the commercial director of Düsseldorf Airport, myself, who I have been commercial director for Nice Airport for 12 years, Alan Borg, who has been commercial director of Copenhagen, Brussels, and Budapest Airport for many years, and Karim Baina, who has been working on the airline side for many years. So what we do many things, but one of our specialty is to help airports organize their tender process. We put our knowledge and support to achieve their objectives. And obviously their objectives is to appoint the highest quality concessionaires to operate the commercial space, to ensure management methods are up to date and innovative, to offer the best choice and selection to passengers, to enhance the level of passenger service in the airport, and to drive the most optimum levels of commercial income without compromising the quality of the offer, to drive fair and transparent commercial process, and to create a frame, a proposal that is sufficiently flexible to take into account the specificity of the COVID crisis impact. Now we are going directly, sorry if it's a bit small, but I will read it. This is what we explained to the airport when we discuss about the possibility to organize a tender process in the middle of those type of crises. First of all, what we tell airports is if they have a possibility to postpone the tender process, we recommend it, because we do believe that it's not the best moment to do that. So the first thing we do to airport is we recommend to postpone the tender process if possible, and to give more time to the existing tenants. But in some occasion, it's not possible. It may be for different reasons. It may be because it is a new terminal, it is a new facilities, or they absolutely need or want to organize a tender. So in that case, we tell them that we need to take into account a certain number of principle to make it work. So to begin with, it is important to remind the airports, what are the reasoning of the potential bidders when they make the choice to participate or not to the tender organized by an airport authority? How do they decide also the level of revenue share and minimum guarantee that they propose? The 2 points are obviously tightly intertwined. The first question a potential bidder will ask himself is to evaluate his chance to obtain a profit on the duration of the contract for their operation if they win the bid, if they believe that there are too many risks, or if the conditions imposed by the airport are too heavy. Either they will not bid or they will bid at a low financial level. What the potential bidders like are strong elements of certainty, existing volume of traffic and quality of passengers, reasonable growth forecast of traffic based on past trends, previous performance of existing commercial units in the existing terminals. They ask themselves a question, were the previous tenants profitable or not? And as the airport authority demonstrated flexibility and capacity of adaptation. What the potential bidders dislike, on the contrary, are elements of uncertainty, with in the meantime are elements of inflexibility in the tender parameters proposed by the airports. Those are risks factors. When a crisis is ongoing, and the crisis can be economic, it can be a war, it can be natural events with potential long effects, earthquake, volcano, tsunami, pandemic, it creates obviously major uncertainty on the level of traffic and scenario of recovery. All the fixed parameters in the tender become a problem. They were acceptable in a stable environment, and they become potential deal breakers or generate low bids in a very uncertain environment. For example, if you come with a fixed scenario of traffic growth, if you come with fixed space rent, if you come with short duration contracts, or with selection criteria purely based on finance, with a low level of competition on quality criteria, all this is very bad. The fact that the airport authority is a public entity which has demonstrated in the past a low or lack of capacity of adaptation is obviously also a major risk factor. It is important that the airport realize that the COVID crisis has created a catastrophic situation worldwide for the travel retail operators, even the biggest ones. Their financial and investment capacity has been devastated. They will be very prudent in their commitment. This is why the airports have to demonstrate they have acknowledged the situation and adapted their tender parameters. So what have we done? First of all, concerning the traffic forecast, we need to reduce strongly the traffic forecast for 2021. We need to apply a fast recovery rate in the next years. This leads to a higher total passenger and value of the contracts, but we need to accept that the beginning will be difficult. We need to introduce a recovery period. We recommend a minimum of 2-year recovery period, during which the bidders can propose different levels of revenue share and minimum guarantee per passenger based on the scale of traffic. And this is crucial to create the confidence for the bidders and obtain higher bids. We will go back in more details on this point. Concerning the tender process, we need to increase the threshold of the technical document more than 60% to make the quality when I mean technical, commercial quality very important compared to the purely financial part. We need to bundle package. We need to launch tenders with larger footprint, not to try to make a bid for 1 or 2 units, but to make larger things. Concerning the space rent, we recommend airports to forget about fixed rent. So we propose either to have no space rent or to have no space rent when the traffic goes below a certain level, or we have a space rent that is linked to the level of traffic, because the space rent can become a real burden if you don't have a lot of traffic. So if we go more in detail, traffic forecast in the past was given by the airport, generally based on an increase of a few % per year, taking into account the past increase. And this obviously has been broken by 2020, 2021. So we need to think differently. We need to update the traffic forecast to reflect the latest condition of the industry. We need to reduce strongly the traffic of 2021, but to apply a faster recovery rate in the remaining period of the contract. By updating the traffic forecast, we expect to show bidders that we have taken into account the worsening development of the COVID period pandemic since June 2020, while at the same time we reassure them in our confidence for a faster return of traffic. This way, we expect the bidders to be able to place higher bids in terms of revenue share and MGRS. Concerning the recovery period, generally the contracts were built on the 5 years period. It can be longer, but usually it's 5 years, which is too short to cover the investment risk if it includes a 1 to 2 years recovery period. Without change, it would have a negative impact on the level of revenue share and MGRS. So we consider 7 years contract as a minimum, and we recommend that it includes a 2-year recovery in the contract of 7 years. 2 years would be for the recovery. For this recovery period, we are proposing in the bids that we are in charge of, we are proposing that the bidders are able to make a proposal of a revenue share and minimum guarantee per passenger based on the level of traffic. Is it between it's really a scale or a tier system. The tier system is what happens if the traffic is between 0 and 20% of the normal traffic. What happens if it is between 20 and 40, 40 and 60, etc. And so they bid what is the bidder able to give if the traffic is only 20% of the normal traffic? What are they able to give if the traffic is only 60%, etc.? So this is very important because it makes it possible for the bidders to understand that if there is not the normal traffic, automatically they will have a decreased situation and a decreased rent. Concerning the winner selection, we have pushed the system into giving more points to the technical and commercial criteria. Concerning the bundling of packages, we believe that we need to have a larger package with more units in order to make it possible for the bidders to mitigate the risks and to have a larger footprint. Concerning the space rent, as I mentioned, fixed rent is a huge concern for bidders in this COVID or post-COVID era, especially for the F&B, fashion, or big surface package. Each time you have a large number of square meters, it's a risk because if you don't have traffic, you would have to pay a rent whatever happens. So we are proposing either to cancel the space rent and to have only a revenue share system, or if the airport does not agree to do that, to do a space rent that is linked to the level of traffic. The normal space rent would be paid only when you reach 100% of the traffic. If you don't reach 100% of the traffic, you would pay 20% of the normal space rate, or 40 or 60. Okay. Concerning what we explained about the tier system, that is very important. The risk profile for the bidders in the bidding process will be crucial in determining the airport ability to attract bidders and to attract strong bidding. For bidders, COVID-19 is undoubtedly a great concern, and the three most important risk factors are the level of passengers, how long before it will take before the passenger levels are back to normal, and how the passenger profile and associated spending behavior for different passenger profiles will be influenced. Regarding point 3, we need to acknowledge that the spending behavior is different from passenger profile to passenger profile, and therefore our suggestion is that the minimum guarantee is laid out according to the main passenger segments. If we take some examples, if you have a majority of traffic that goes to France, it's not the same as if you have a huge part of the traffic that goes to USA. And you cannot put in a tender just one minimum guarantee per passenger. You need to split into the main stream of traffic. So what would be your minimum guarantee for France? What would be your minimum guarantee for South America? And what would be your minimum guarantee for per passenger for North America, for example? In order to mitigate the above described risks, our recommendation is to introduce a mechanism into the tender terms that will address those concerns. In the following description of the mechanism, simulation and revenue effects from the tier system. Our calculations are based on introducing a 2 years plus 5 years contract with a recovery period of 2 years, where bidders create their own business case based on different level of business, and with a minimum of 5 years fixed period to depreciate and amortize investment. So we introduce a staircase model that addresses the different level of passenger volumes, and we introduce a minimum guarantee per passenger split on the main passenger segments. And so we will show you the system. So basically, this is exactly what I was saying. For the recovery period, we have a system of here we present a stair that is with 6 steps. It can be 5, it can be 4, it can be 7. It's something to discuss with the airport. And the thing is, it is based, each stair is based on what is the percentage of the traffic of 2019. So if we are very low, if 1 month the traffic is at between 0 and 20% of the normal traffic, how much is the bidder ready to pay? To pay in terms of revenue share and in terms of minimum guarantee. Same for the next step, same for the following steps. And so the bidder know that if the traffic is not there, they will not pay the normal level. And it is automatic. So depending on airports, because it depends on airports, this situation can be contractually for 2 years, or it can be as long as the traffic is not back. So this is different from airport to airport. The tier system will reduce the risk profile, which will attract more bidders and achieve better financial bids. For the recovery period, bidders are asked to provide a binding offer in the form of revenue share and MGRS that the bidders believe are sustainable for each step of the staircase and according to passenger volumes levels. In the binding templates, the bidders are asked to substantiate their calculation by showing their business case calculation for each step of the staircase. The insight will enable us to validate their bids, and in the evaluation process. The top tier of the staircase is 100% of 2019, which is, in this context, is back to normal. The top tier should be aligned with the bid for the first normal year, the second or third year of the contract. The recovery period expires after 12 or 24 months, but if monthly 2019 traffic are reached before the end of the recovery period, the final revenue share will be activated. This is one option. Basically, this is what we have put in place. So we have used this system for different airports. We have worked for Santiago de Chile Airport. This was the joint venture between Vinci and Aéroport de Paris. So we did those tenders in the first semester of 2020. We have also worked on tenders for Caribbean Airport, for the France Airport. For the France is doing the tender for the duty free, for all the shops, and also for F&B. And we will begin in 1 month the tender for Pointe-à-Pitre Airport in Guadeloupe. And this will also be based on this system. In the meantime, it is not in this region, but we have worked on the tender of Bali Airport in Indonesia, and we have worked also on the tender of Bangalore Airport in India. All the time we have used this system of recovery period additional to the normal duration of the contract. So if it was a normal contract of 5 years, we have added 2 years. If it was a 10 years contract, we still have added 2 years because we believe that it was important to take into account this recovery of traffic. After that, just to explain how we work, what we do for airport is we make the step-by-step preparation. We do the RFQ, we write down the RFP, we help them to publish, we accompany them in the Q&A, we help them to analyze at the reception of the offer, we participate to the bidder presentation, we do the analysis of the proposal, we do the summary of the results, we make a first recommendation, then there is a negotiation with the best bidders, and we do the final synthesis. I think I have other slides to go into more details, but I think it's not necessary because it's more classical. And I think that for me, I prefer if we go directly to the questions.
Sounds good. Eric, thanks very much indeed. Very enlightening. And I think it built on what we discussed a little bit. I think it was April last year when we did the webinar, and you were really building towards this and maybe had introduced it at Bali from memory at that point, or at least trialed it. So that's obviously expanded to other locations since then. I've a couple of questions for you. I might just get a quick reaction from Matt and Sammy. Sammy is an airport operator. I'm not sure what measures you've taken in terms of commercial to adapt to the RFP system. Just a view on what Eric was suggesting there. Obviously, a suite of potential measures there in terms of adding 2 years to the typical contract recovery periods, built in bigger bundled packages, no rent below a certain level, and space rent linked to traffic, and even MAG by passenger segment is interesting. Maybe just a quick fire reaction on those.
Yeah, no, I was worried you were going to actually point that to me. No, I'm generally aligned actually with Eric in terms of the philosophy behind how you may want to structure sort of initial sort of rent relief, but in terms of the long-term impact of this on sort of deals sort of going forward. I'm sure we'll sort of get into it as a whole, but there's not one thing which fixes the entire problem, and so you have to look at a number of different variables to sort of solve the short-term sort of need versus the long-term sort of impact of COVID. And I think ultimately where Eric was coming from, there's a number of sort of tools available or existing tools which have been flexed to deal with this particular sort of circumstance we're sort of dealing with. And I think in our certain businesses, we haven't got one sort of one-size-fits-all approach to it. Every single airport, because of the different relationships we either have with the governments in place we're operating on behalf, or through the different relationships we have with different concession partners, have deemed it necessary to have an entirely different approach. But ultimately, it's not a case of full risk transfer. We all went into this taking some level of risk, and ultimately, as much as the model probably is going to have to probably change in the short term and probably the long term too as well, we still have to sort of bear that in mind. We don't go into business, and ideally, yeah, great, it'd be great to go into business where none of us have to take any risks, but that is certainly not the world we live in.
Yeah, for sure. Matt, from a retailer point of view, what would you think of that in terms of your appetite to perhaps invest in an environment where there was at least some consideration taken to the risk being diluted a little bit, at least from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, it's critical. It's critical for us. I mean, we've been looking at new opportunities, and we're also considering our existing opportunities. And I think that everybody would agree that flexibility is key, not only for new contracts, but I'm incredibly impressed with how our landlords have been flexible in reacting to this crisis. I think the solution is going to be something where flexibility is included in the language of the agreements. So, Eric, honestly, the more that you spoke, the more that I wanted to come over and give you a hug, because I think it makes so much sense, and you've articulated a lot of the ideas that we've had. But to see it point by point, I think you've captured just about everything. I really loved hearing the idea about taking into account that not all traffic is created equally. I think that's critically important, and it concerns me a little bit to hear about. I'm happy to see that domestic traffic is increasing as much as it is. But I've been trying to tell my landlords, keep in mind, for the duty-free operator, that doesn't really mean anything. I'm still in the same place as I was in April of last year.
Sure.
So I think that's a critically important point that everybody needs to keep in mind. So I'm really happy to hear that Eric included that. The one thing that I would add, or just make sure that I would like to see landlords also keep in mind the timing of those guaranteed payments. So if there's flexibility in the contract, I think it's really important that, at least for the short term, there's flexibility on a monthly basis, because things can go wrong on a moment's notice, as we know. So, it would be really unfortunate if the flexibility was only available on an annual basis. If there's a crisis in January, we're not going to be able to wait till next December for it to reset. So that's just something else to keep in mind. And Eric, maybe you were going there already. I know you had to cut your presentation a little bit short, but big picture, I think it's a major step in the right direction. And I was happy to see that Sammy, it sounds like he agreed with it in principle too, because we overlap here in the States. I'm happy to hear that Sammy's seeing it the same way.
Yeah, Eric, just a couple of questions on to follow up. How you treat the event, perhaps of a second or third crisis, because we're in this on-off situation with traffic so much. An upturn and then a downturn in passenger over the term. Do you simply just extend further and build that into the plan? It's a difficult scenario in many ways for an airport, isn't it?
Yeah, I understand. Our recommendation to airports is when as long as we have requested the bidders to make proposals of what is their capacity to pay in terms of revenue share and minimum guarantee if the traffic is 20, 40, 60, 80% of the normal traffic. We told them that obviously we in order to make the bid, we need to take one scenario. So the one scenario is 2 years. But our recommendation is, of course, those elements should be kept as negotiation tool for the future. It means if somebody says to you, he's able to pay 5%, if he has only 20% of the traffic, this is a base for your negotiation. If whatever happens in 1 year or 2 years, you're unfortunately down again to 20% of the traffic, this should be used. Some of the airports have acknowledged it very easily. Some are a bit more reluctant to make it automatic. So and it's, I understand, when you are privately managed, it's different. When you are a state-owned airport, it's more complicated because they cannot commit. But all of them, what they have appreciated, and probably the most difficult for us was Santiago de Chile, because it was a complex system with two owners, Vinci and Aéroport de Paris, plus the state of Chile that are together. So this was the most complicated one. But at least they agreed to say, okay, at least we will have a basis for the negotiation. And this is useful because it helps for the future. And obviously, what we told all those airports was, if you don't give this COVID period recovery, nobody will come, for sure, because it's too risky. Nobody will want to bid as if business was for you as usual. It's just not possible. And what was positive is we are not talking in theory. We have done those bids and we have done those tenders. And I can tell you that we had for Chile, for example, we had the participation of most of the major companies. We had Dufry, we had Lagardère, we had Elior, we had most of them, and they did participate and they placed nice bids, frankly speaking, nice bids, and this was fine. We will have in the next days the bids for the France. We know that we have a good participation both in duty free and F&B, and most of the bidders were happy because they have seen that for those airports we have taken in count that it was a special period, and we have given them the opportunity to make an offer based on this COVID recovery.
Okay, so I want to just turn a bit more to Sami and Matt, and just get a view of how the impact has your business overall, I suppose, from over the past year, and then we'll maybe return back to this theme in a few moments. Maybe Sami, just briefly, can you talk us through the impact on your locations as we enter Q2 2021, and I guess how you're reacting?
Yeah, sure, David. I spoke about this before. It's like most businesses, catastrophic. There's no sort of coming at it or putting a sort of a positive light on it. It was pretty awful. This time last year when we were sort of dealing with the initial impact across our airports across the globe, we saw a 90, 95, 98% sort of drop in traffic, and that was related to the majority of our airports are actually the main entry point for a particular country as well. So we were keeping maybe 2% of our sort of traffic, but purely because we had to keep open because we had to welcome sort of those passengers trying to get back to the particular island of the country they were venturing. Now, as Matt sort of touched on this too as well, but as we sort of get come into sort of quarter two and look at sort of what does 21 look like, we are seeing the signs of recovery. It is those green shoots, which is, extremely encouraging. It is a far cry from where we were. And, it's certainly in sort of our business right now, we don't see that coming back, depending on which airport, but for another 2, 3, maybe 4 years to get to sort of 2019 levels. But domestic passengers are sort of coming back, certainly in the United States. We're sort of fortunate to have some great airlines sort of partner relationships, and some of our airports are highly dependent on domestic traffic versus sort of international traffic. In the case of Chicago Midway, the majority of that traffic is domestic, and Southwest Airlines have sort of 93% of our sort of capacity there too, and they're sort of, they're showing encouraging signs of putting capacity back into the market, which evidently is sort of, trying to drive sort of that level of non-aero income. However, sort of, in other airports, sort of certainly in the Caribbean for us, where we are dependent on the international traffic, that isn't sort of the case. Capacity there is still sort of, around sort of the 20%, 30% sort of mark where we expect it to be. But, it's really about turning efforts into what does it look like when the traffic does come back, and how do we maximize the opportunity for the passengers we do have, because there's not really too much more we can do with it right now.
Yeah, and just briefly on the business side, with concessions, many of them, what kind of proportion are you open, and many locations mothballed at this point across the network? I guess it differs entirely from location to location.
It really does differ on location to location. It's certainly, Eric's doing some work in the Caribbean right now. We were going through the midst of a RFP process in Montego Bay, and actually we're sort of fortunate enough to get that awarded and sort of create those win-win sort of situations, both for those prospective bidders who've now been awarded, as well as ourselves, as far as sort of, the long-term relationship there stands. But it was certainly worrying, and that development is going to continue on schedule. We haven't actually delayed any of the project there. However, in other airports, we've had to put a pause to the construction and development of the concession program because, frankly, there's just too much space. We'd planned to grow the concession space based on all the expectations we had sort of a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and unfortunately, with the reduction in traffic, where we stand today, and again, sort of bring sort of Chicago to light. We've got probably about 60% of our program back open again, with sort of 50-60% of our capacity sort of back in play. But we were planning on doubling the size of the concession space over the next 2 years through a development program. That just can't happen right now because we haven't got enough passengers to actually open up the program we do currently have.
Yeah, and so I suppose right sizing, to use that oft-used phrase,
Yeah.
will be a big part of your thinking for the next 1, 2, 3 years and maybe beyond.
Yeah, no, certainly it is absolutely a case of right sizing the business for the short term, and then rerunning those metrics based on what we expect the recovery to be, and appropriately pick the right time to start construction again. I would sort of say, it's not to say that you can't keep development going. We have to think creatively and outside the box, because there is something to be said about doing construction development while passenger numbers are sort of not their usual levels, because from an airport operator's point of view, it's the most ideal time for the least disruption to all the other stakeholders, including the passengers in the building.
Yeah. Matt, can I just turn to you? Maybe talk us through impact. Clearly, as a duty-free operator, you don't have that ability to lean on domestic travel. So impact of crisis on your business at this point as we head into Q2?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I was saying before, unfortunately, we were torpedoed, just like the rest of the industry, and just took on a massive amount of water. And we continue to be in that same place. I mean, we had closed the majority of our operations in March and April. Some stayed open, and then as the summer approached, there was an increase in traffic, and we've kind of reset our business to what's happened this summer. So there was a little bit of a pop in business this summer, and our business is now sort of reset to that cadence. So, it fell off a little bit in the fall, it increased in December, and then we had the typical fall off in January, which, tell you the truth, we were pretty encouraged that it wasn't worse than that in January and February. But it's been really rough, and we're not in such a different place as we were at the beginning of the crisis, unfortunately. So we've had to do, major surgery in our business here in terms of reducing our labor force, and we basically quartered our labor force. The people that are still here are working with salary reductions, with hour reductions. So we're doing everything that we can to just survive. And that's been the name of the game, just survival, treading water, however you want to put it. The question now that we're asking ourselves, and I don't have the answer to that question, is when is this crisis over? And we keep saying when it's over, when it's over, when it's over. The longer it goes on, the murkier that becomes. So for us, just hearing about flexibility in contracts is something that I think all stakeholders are going to need it. Because had we had flexibility written into the contract at the beginning, there probably would have been a lot less panic on the landlord side and on the tenant side. Instead, we were all kind of like, well, who's going to blink here? Is this going to happen? I think it's important to include that language for the next crisis, whether it's a pandemic or whatever it may be.
Right. Yeah, Matt, just to come back to that on the question of, I suppose, greater balance in the relationships as you might see it. Do you see that being a prospect and probably, an imperative at this point?
I think that, I think that, first of all, I'm blown away by the support that we receive, both from our landlords and also from our suppliers. Everybody has been tremendously supportive. The fact that mags actually went away was something that we never really even contemplated, to tell you the truth. But I think everybody was also acting in their own self-interest, which is totally fine. I think the landlords understood the mags didn't make sense anymore. If they wanted to have stores that are open at the airport, it just didn't make sense. And I think our suppliers understood that if they kept their foot on our throat in terms of paying some of the old bills on time, they would be forcing operators like us out of business also and have nobody to sell to. So I think the fact that everybody was reasonable, I think it was that everybody was acting in their own self-interest, and it worked out very well for everybody, as well as could be given the magnitude of the crisis.
Yeah, Sammy, I mean, what do you see maybe as the impact on the wider impact on industry relationships, not just through this crisis, but perhaps, for years to come?
It's going to be positive, David, you sort of alluded to this, but it's times of crisis when real and true relationships are sort of forged, and the true colors are shown as well of those relationships you've tied in for typically in our world, pretty long term, between 5, 8, 15, 20 years sometimes, depending on the relationships we have with certain operators, depending on what investment they're putting in. But I think there's elements which have to be redrawn, and we've typically sort of stayed away from generally fixed mag but having variable mags, and so that's paid some dividend. I think also it's important to sort of recognize, I think most operators do, they have their own challenges, but airport operators do too. We have some bigger bills to pay as well, and there has to be some sort of level of compromise there. And I think initially when this started, there was that self-interest, as Matt was mentioning, and we're all looking after our own business and trying to, get some stability in our own sort of P&Ls. But as time goes on, I think it's important to recognize there has to be that balance. Like, we've all got businesses run, we all have our own objectives of where to get to, and it's trying to find that sort of common vision to where we sort of want to get to and enjoy some good and feel some of the pain together too as well. And isn't it a case of just going cap in hand to a landlord, and use that term loosely, to say, well, I've got a problem, how are you going to figure it out? It's like, no, how are we going to figure it out? And how are we going to share the pain, and how we're going to share the upside too? So Eric's whole point about, we have scaled percentage rents in duty free already, depending on what category is in question. But to actually bring that down to a particular passenger segment, there's some notion to that. Actually, it's like, if the airport's going to deliver some level of traffic and some traffic is more profitable than other traffic, then evidently we'd like to share in that upside too as well. If we're going to move away from fixed mags or no mags altogether, there has to be some upside somewhere. You can't just get rid of all the risk and it sort of not be replaced with some positive somewhere else.
Yeah, I mean, Eric, just briefly on the reaction among bidders. I mean, it sounded like it was reasonably positive to some of those suggestions that you put, and including the one about perhaps a mag per passenger segment overall. What was the retailer and F&B concessionaire response to that?
Very, very positive. For example, when we discussed about that, this was crucial for example, for Bali, this is not in the region but Bali airport was depending on Australian and Chinese passengers. And if we did not put elements based on the segments, this would be too risky, just too risky to bid. So it was a no-go. If we did not do that, we wouldn't have any bids. So the fact that we were accepting to have a system with a proposal based on it's not nationality, it's destination. This was crucial.
Right. Just a quick one on the consumer of the future, because clearly that affects everything that we do in terms of the contractual side and the way we plan space. Matt, you know, how do you see the future for duty-free and retail overall at airports, and also how the crisis is going to affect the offer, the environment, and the way customers react to it?
I think the future is very, very bright for airport retail, duty-free. I think, you know, everybody talks about the pandemic as being the great accelerant, and I think that's going to be true at airports also. And in the years going into 2019, you could see there was a very big push from retailers, you know, global brands to get into airports, whereas, you know, maybe 5-10 years ago, it was really hard to compel brands to come in. So I think as street retail becomes maybe less relevant, the airports are going to continue to become very interesting places to do business for retailers. And so I'm bullish on, you know, I just don't know, again, when that's going to happen, if it's in a year's time or 5 years time, but I think retail in general is going to improve significantly at the airports, and especially here in the States, where I think we kind of trail a lot of other parts in the world in terms of what we have to offer. So I see really great things happening at the airport. I just don't have the crystal ball to tell you what month or year that may be, but it's going to come just the same way that it has been coming leading into the crisis.
Yeah, Sammy, for you also, you know, as the crisis marked the end of travel retail as we know it, and that there'll be a new kind of travel retail world emerging, a new shopping environment, you know, the way we think about the categories, the way they're laid out and how people transact is going to be needed in future?
Fundamentally, perhaps not, but I think it is going to be different. And certainly in our business, it is sort of going to be different as we work with different concession operators. Certainly plan sort of our own sort of facilities out of the future too. You know, you are going to see some change. You know, in particular, like, you know, I think there's going to be a lot of lessons from the duty-free model, just from a retail principle point of view, and how the Trinity really does come together into specialty retail perhaps too as well. And so, you know, there could be a hit on the number of specialty retailers you see unit by unit in airports, and you may see some of those actually come together more with sort of the shop-in-shop concept, and do similar to sort of the, you know, the agreements they have in sort of the duty-free stores too as well. I think you'll see sort of, certainly in the US, the activation of technology far more as well on the retail side than you sort of have over recent years, and certainly, you know, other parts of the world are sort of ahead there on the retail side already too. I just, Dermot, if I may, just going back probably a point or two, just on the contract elements, and, you know, maybe it's similar to sort of what Eric was saying as well. I think airports do have to recognize the world has changed, and I think it's also fair for concession operators to understand we don't actually know how it's changed in some respect, or what the impact of that is too. And so there really has to be some serious collaboration, and more so just saying so and actually doing it. As we, as airports, put out tenders and put out RFP process, is to actually start that dialogue early. And, you know, I think I would say Vantage does a fair job at that before we put something out, of actually collaborating with industry wherever possible, time permitting, to say, well, we're thinking of, and this is what we want out of it, but ultimately, how would you react if these perimeters or pillars existed? And then sort of change and tweak accordingly before something sort of goes out to market, rather than there being this rigid approach to say, well, this is what it is, take it or leave it. And there's probably a point in time where that has to happen, depending on which country or which area of the world you're in, because there's a process to follow. But there is a fair bit of input required at the start to make sure there is something which goes out to market, which is workable for all parties, rather than there being this notion of, well, the airport say it has to be like that, so no one's going to bid, or the airports aren't working with us. I think there's a little bit of both to both sides. Airports have to be a bit more flexible at the start, as well as within a contract too, as well. But that comes with sort of true collaboration at the start to really understand each other's motives, and an understanding that we all have to take some risk, but we all then have to share in the collective upside.
Yeah. Eric, do you see any of that happening at the moment in terms of the advanced planning among airports and their appetite to be as collaborative as that further out from the process itself? And I think it's something that makes logical sense, but not necessarily airport by airport in each case.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's depends of airports' mentality and openness. So it's more complicated, but basically what we've seen is, if we take the example of what we did for Bali, in the past, Bali Airport has done a tender for duty-free separately from fashion. And we convinced them that it was necessary to bundle fashion and duty-free if we wanted to have the best offer. So it's a question of risk mitigation. It's a question of having probably less partners but bigger ones, and I think this is the best solution, because if you have one shop, you have a very strong and potentially devastating effect if it's not working as planned. If you have 10 or 20 shops or 20 space, it's easier to mitigate the risk.
Eric, I think in principle, again, I agree with you, that sentiment, but I think what we'll find ourselves in, maybe if we go down this road in 5 years' time, that there's actually no small operators around, and we end up with just a few sort of big players in the market, and the whole dynamics of that conversation changes over time. And as an industry, I think we have to just look out for the fact that we should be encouraging new businesses to come in and provide those opportunities, and the contractual relations between those airports and small operators are the ones which sort of need to change to encourage that level of investment.
Yes, and Matt, you're coming from the point of view of an independent who's out there and not one of the traditional big guys, and clearly you want to see that flexibility and be able to be in a position to offer a point of difference.
100%, and I think Sammy, expressed my position perfectly. One of the things that we like to sell ourselves on when we present ourselves is that we are not the biggest. We are extremely focused on what we do, and I think it's really important. And I think a lot of our landlords really value having an independent, smaller operator. So I understand the sentiment, Eric, and I just, selfishly, I would say I think there is a place, and there will continue to be a place for smaller operators. And maybe if packages are what becomes important, maybe it's collaborations of independent operators, or large operators include some smaller operators. But again, I selfishly, I think there is a place. We've proven it over years, and I think that a lot of our landlords enjoy that sort of relationship also.
Yeah, Eric, just briefly, next steps in your key airport locations where you're working in terms of your tenders and timelines?
Now we are going to finish the tenders for the France. We are launching the F&B tender for Pointe-à-Pitre. We will be working soon on Barbados. And we are, in the meantime, finishing Bali, and we are continuing on India for Bangalore, and we are working with Zurich Airport International for the new Delhi Airport, Noida. This is a huge project that will come on the market in 2 years, basically for the new airport of Delhi that should be 140 million passenger in a few years. So it's a big one.
Yeah, well, we've heard a good bit about that, so we wish you luck with that. Just finally, Sammy and Matt, just how do you see, just taking into account what we've discussed about tender model and partnerships and relationships. So does a new, maybe future industry landscape look like to you in the months and perhaps years ahead? Sammy first, perhaps.
The crystal ball sort of element again. I wish I had it. It's going to change. I don't really know how it's going to change, but it is, and I think it's going to be driven by those open conversations and collaborations as I mentioned. I think certainly for us, everything's on the table, but it has to be sort of that win-win situation. It doesn't need to be what it is today. Could we look entirely different? I'm very much open to that. I know our company as a whole is very much open to that. Innovation has always been key, sort of a part, sort of pillar of how we do business. And we've got a fair few projects that we're having to sort of bring to fruition. JFK Terminal 6 and 7 is part of that. Philadelphia 30th Street rail station is sort of part of that. How we go through those leasing programs is going to be important. I think that's also sort of in tone with capital as well. So some operators right now are really struggling for capital. So I think certainly as an organization, we're open to having that discussion that maybe the operator puts almost no capital in, and the investment is entirely ours. But the dynamics on the other side have to change as well in terms of rent and term, because if we're taking on all the capital risk associated with a particular project too as well. And so we're spending very much time trying to see how we can continue to be opportunistic while sort of the current environment is happening, rather than sort of stay steady and still. I think we'll do anything but. It's time to shake it up and try to look differently to spearhead the projects we do have and find new ones.
Good. Well, we wish you well on that journey. Matt, how do you see the future taking shape then in those terms from your point of view?
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a one size fits all solution. I think there will be flexibility written into the contract. Hopefully it's to the specificity that Eric presented. But even somewhere less than that would still work, depending on the airport and the contract. And I think we're very open-minded to changing the way that we do business. So I have to say I'm delighted to hear the rhetoric from Eric and to see Sammy echoing it. So I think none of us really knows exactly what it will be. I think it will continue to evolve. I think going further into the future, I could see a situation where we go back to where we were with very high guaranteed rents as the airports become the very in demand places that they were. But I think it's going to be critically important that flexibility is included in those contracts in the event that there is a major catastrophe. We're not all sitting there scratching our heads at that time or for months afterwards trying to figure out what's what. So we'll see.
Good. Okay. Well, look, many thanks. And I think that's been a very good discussion and we appreciate all of your input. My thanks go to Eric Trichot, Sammy Patel and Matt Greenbaum. Thanks, gentlemen, and to everyone else, please enjoy the remaining sessions in the Knowledge Hub.
Welcome to our Somers Coffee Break, sister Zoom style, here at the Summit of the Americas. I am Seema Sadaker.
And I am Nisha Sadaker, and we are the Sadaker Sisters. And I'm enjoying all of my Zoom calls and all the amazing virtual summit experiences from downstairs.
And I am enjoying all of our Zoom calls from upstairs with Somers.
This is going to be such a fun coffee break. I was kind of thinking a Cafe Zino.
Cafe Zino, isn't that Brazil?
It is. And did you know that Brazil is the largest exporter of coffees in the world?
I did know that because I know Brazilians drink up to 6 to 7 cups of coffee a day. I could totally live there.
Their love for coffee runs just as deep as ours. Should we make a cup?
I think we should.
To make your Somers Cafe Zino, boil 8 ounces of water, add 1 tablespoon of sugar, 2 tablespoons of Pilao coffee, and let boil for 5 to 6 minutes. Pour over in the pour over coffee right through your filter. Let's prepare our foam. Add Somris and half to the frother and let it foam up. Pour the coffee from the pour over into your Cafezino cups. Add 2 spoons of foam Somris and half right into the coffee. Add caramel for flavor and garnish with tea biscuits. Enjoy.
This coffee smells so delicious.
This Cafezino is so rich.
And with a little Somris, who knows what could happen?
Let's find out. Niche, Brazil was amazing.
I want to go back.
Well, that's what Somris does. Takes you around the world.
It does add magic to your coffee. Ciao.
Ciao.